offer a brief welcome to you. Thank you for coming to our lunch forum. It's pretty exciting, actually, given the fact that I had asked Annalisa Buttici if she would come to teach in my Global Pentecostalism class, which meets Thursday mornings. And we thought we'd ask her to stay and do a lunch forum the same day. Annalisa is co-teaching a course with Harvey Cox on Global Pentecostalism that meets on Wednesdays down there. So this was really nice, but what was really special is that after I had given the invitation, we decided that the theme for this year for our lunch forums was going to be people on the move, which is all about migration. And here her very area of expertise is on African Pentecostalism in Italy, which is clearly part of this whole subject of people on the move. So really thrilled to have Annalisa here with us, and she can tell you a little bit more about herself. Do you mind saying a few things?
Sure.
Because I want to let you get going. And she'll give a presentation, and then when we're finished, we'll open up for questions. And we understand people have to come and go, and that's just fine. Don't feel embarrassed if you have to leave. And then we'll finish well before we're done. We'll finish when we're finished, okay? But it's officially over at 1:30, but we probably will finish a little before that. That's fine. Okay? So thank you for coming, and please.
Thank you, Professor Johnson, for inviting me. This is my second time here. The first time I came here was for the presentation of the last atlas, and it was really a pleasure to know this wonderful place and be here again. It's very, very nice. My name is Annalisa Buttici, as you can read from my slide. I am Italian. I am a sociologist, anthropologist of religion. I graduated in political science at the University of Padova, Italy, in the northeast of Italy, close to Venice. And then I got my PhD in sociology and methodology for social science research at the Catholic University of Milan. I was involved for several years in migration studies, and I was especially interested in the African diasporas in the Mediterranean land. And then by doing research on the African diaspora, I discovered Pentecostalism. Before, as I was saying to the class this morning, I was not really into religious studies. I was very passionate about migration, about global movements of the people, about diasporas, especially the African diasporas. So while I was doing research, and I was especially working on the Black African diasporas in Italy, which is the majority of them is from West Africa, Senegal, Nigeria, and Ghana. Paradoxically, the African diaspora in Italy is not connected to any colonial past. The population coming from the former colony are really a minority compared to the number of the West African diaspora in Italy, and we will look a little bit at the number. So what we have in Italy is not a colonial migration or post-colonial migration. I don't know how we wanted to define it. It's an economic migration. So it's a population who doesn't have any ties with the country, with Italy, except from the fact of being part of a flow of economic resources, capital, goods, labor force, and human being. Unfortunately, Italy is very famous for the terrible trafficking of human beings from West Africa to the Mediterranean. Women and men are being trafficked even today for the sex market and for the black job market. So what you see in the international news about Africans dying in the Mediterranean, which is the biggest sea cemetery in the world, is part of this traffic of movement of people from the African continent to Europe. Many of the people who are crossing the Mediterranean are from countries who are facing terrible political and economic crisis, also due to the past work of the European empire. And so this population are now trying to find their way to the Western world, including Italy. Some of them come from the eastern part of Africa, and others come from West Africa. And I can tell you that while I was doing my ethnographic research in Italy, visiting the churches, especially Nigerian and Ghanaian churches, Pentecostal churches, and I was listening to the testimony that the church members were giving in front of their congregation, I was moved and struck by the testimony of some of those Africans who made it, who crossed the Mediterranean, could survive to the sea and landed in the Pentecostal churches. And it was simply amazing to listen their journey of life from Nigeria or Ghana to the Pentecostal churches in Italy. So what I will present you today is a little bit of my research on my field work in Italy. I will not have time, I don't have time to talk about my field work in Nigeria and a little bit in Ghana. And, but there is a lot going on in the academia about research on Pentecostalism in the African continent. Several colleagues wrote wonderful books on Pentecostalism in Nigeria and Ghana, but nobody wrote on what is going on in the most Catholic country, Italy, with the African Pentecostal. So I am the only one who can open you this wonderful windows to you. So this is what I will do with you today. So I started this research in 2008. And at the beginning, I was really new to the field. So what I did was to try to get into the churches to the connection I've been making along the years of studying the African diaspora in Italy. And the first Pentecostal churches I met was the Faith Tabernacle congregation in the city of Padua. That was my first encounter with a Pentecostal church. But why we are talking about Pentecostalism, and those are the only data I want to show you today. You can get better data, better details at the center that Professor Todd Johnson is so wonderfully leading, and this is really a precious gift you have in this place. The center is simply amazing, and the work that you can find there is impressive. So just to be happy with the little data I give to you, you have your own treasure just down on the hills. You can get better information. But just to give you an idea of the demographic impact of Pentecostalism and how huge and massive is this movement. Some of my students at the Harvard Divinity School agreed on what other scholars said about Pentecostalism, that after communism is the biggest global movement in the world because the numbers are just massive. So the question is why? why this expression of Christianity is getting so powerful. What is the appeal of this new Christianity? Some people say new, other people say, well, it's not really new. This is a movement of restoration. And this is the thesis of Professor Harvey Cox when he said that Pentecostalism is the recovering of the primal speech, primal spirituality, and primal. There is another primal speech, primal faith, primal, by the way, Fire from Heaven. You can find all his approach in the book Fire from Heaven. I think it's at the third edition, and it is having a new life now because it was one of the first books on Pentecostalism. So the idea is the power of Pentecostalism rests in, first of all, the charismata, or the charismatic gifts that are expressed and possessed through Pentecostalism. And if Pentecostalism is really gaining so much all over the world, what is happening in countries where they are a minority? How are they dealing with other religions? And how are they dealing with the mainline churches? So my case study is about how an ethnic, racial, economic, social, political, religious minority, like African Pentecostals in Italy, are dealing with the monopoly of the Catholic Church. How are they surviving? And how are they challenging? Because the idea is that they are challenging, and they are doing it in a very, very original way. And I think that this is one of the main points of my research. But let's go first to the slides. So the pictures that you will see in my presentation are part of the visual archive I gathered through the wonderful collaboration with a professional photographer and filmmaker. So those are the pictures that are that kind of narrates my field work. And so through the picture, you will see the people I met, the people I talked to. And through the pictures, you will also understand a little bit more about Pentecostalism and about its emotional power. And this is the African population in Italy. It kind of gives you an idea of how big the communities are. And of course, those are the data on the population with official permit of stay. So we do not know, or we can imagine how that the numbers are much bigger than that. The Nigerian embassy in Italy estimates that the percentage of non-regular migrants to the regular migrants is 1-to-1. This is a huge statement, but this is what they told me. They, of course, don't have data, but the idea, understanding they have is this. And this is very relevant if you want to understand the kind of life experience the African diaspora, the various diasporas community have in a country where half of the community doesn't have regular permit to stay. So I just want to kind of connect you with the deep and sad condition of vulnerability of this population. And this is important because this should connect our mind on what is the role of the churches. This is the spread of the population, Nigerian and Ghanaian population in Italy. And this map is important because it shows you where the population is, especially in northern Italy, where the economy is more stable than in southern Italy. And the following slide gives you an idea of where the churches are. So the churches, of course, are where the majority of the population is. This is the map of the Church of Pentecost, one of the biggest Ghanaian Pentecostal churches in Ghana, and the big Ghanaian Pentecostal church in Italy. And this is their calendar. They love calendars and all these material cultures of celebrating the church and the church member and the people that you see sitting in the calendar. Those are the ones that are in Italy. This is the board of the church. So the majority of the church are located in northern Italy, few churches in southern Italy. Palermo, there is a huge community. Naples, there is also a huge community. Naples, the area of Naples is also the area where the agricultural economy is particularly dependent on the labor of migrants, irregular labor, highly exploited labor. And this is also the area where 3 years ago, 7 Africans were killed by the local mafia because they refused to accept the rule of the Italian mafia, and they were killed. 7 of 7 were killed. So I want to invite you to think of the fact that they dared to refuse while Italians are struggling with mafia. They say, no, we do not stay under your rule. And they kill them. And also one interesting and so moving thing is that Miriam Makeba came to sing for those Africans, and she died in Italy as well. So if you read the life of Miriam Makeba, she's a very, very famous South African singer. And she died in Italy to sing for the Africans who were killed by the Italian mafia. Those are the different districts of the church, and this is to give you an idea of how capillary is the distribution and how the African Pentecostal churches are organizing themselves in the territory. So it means that they have a systematic way of mapping Italy, the territory, and establishing branching according to the demography of the diaspora. And this is another interesting element of the diaspora. So in this slide, you see this church is called the New Life Pentecostal Ministry. It was funded by Bishop Amposa in Italy. It started like a small group of people, a small church with maybe 10, 11 Ghanaians, and it was one of the first Ghanaian Pentecostal church in Italy. Now they have 7 branches, and what Bishop Amposa did is to go back to Ghana, open his own church in Ghana, and open also another branch in the UK. And this tells you about the movement and how interconnected and the direction of the missions, right? So there are Africans from Africa going to Italy or in Europe, planting churches and going back to Africa, but there are also the other side that from Italy, they go to Africa to plant churches, or they go to other European and American states to plant their churches. And but of course, African Pentecostal churches are not the only African churches in Italy. We have still Catholic, Baptist, the Aladura churches. That is one of the traditional, well, it's complicated to locate Aladura. They refuse to call themselves Pentecostals, but they are born out a revival, a religious revival in Nigeria. Of course, there are the Anglican, the Methodist churches. So, and actually, the Pentecostal churches are not the majority of the Christian African churches, because the biggest community are still the Catholics. So within the African diaspora, the biggest Christian community is still the Catholic community. What do? The African Pentecostal churches are very diversified, and they have different gifts and different doctrine, focusing on different spiritual aspect, different elements of a spiritual life, different goals, different desires and aspirations. So from the churches who are working very, very hard to prosperity, from the church who are working for deliverance, divine healing, from the churches who are working on the holiness, so working on the transformation and redemption of the believers. It's like if we want to adopt a very popular theory, a religious market, where you put on your table the salvation goods you want to sell, and people shop. So if you need deliverance, you know that there is that church with that special pastor who is so powerful and he can deliver you. You go to that church. But if you need money, you need a church who is very serious on prosperity. And you go to the pastor who can really say some good prayer for prosperity. So it's really like a religious market. And this is also mirrors and says is a micro-analysis of what is global Pentecostalism. Because even in the course we are teaching at Harvard, we struggle so much to define even what Pentecostalism is and does, because it's such a complicated and articulate reality that it's difficult to grasp and frame in any way. Those are some of the images of the website of the African churches in Italy, and you see the images of the funders in Ghana, Nigeria, and the images of the pastor in charge in Italy. And this is one of the most interesting images that I found on the web. This is the website of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, the biggest Nigerian Pentecostal church, and you see the images of the pastor in charge in Nigeria is Enoch Adeboye, and the picture of the pastor Ike Lewis, the pastor in charge in Italy. And what is the background? The Vatican. So they created this very powerful image of these two pastors and the symbol of Redeemed Christian Church of God overshadowing the Vatican like a ghost, saying, we are here, we are coming, and we overshadow you. Those are some of the images of the national headquarters in Italy. This is the headquarters of the Mountain of Fire Miracle Ministry, one of the most popular healing and deliverance church in Nigeria. This is the headquarters in Rome. You can see here the beautiful altar, personally designed by the wife of the founder, Daniel Olukoya. And the altar, there is a very interesting combination that tells us a lot about the material culture of Pentecostalism, the way Pentecostalism uses colors, images, the symbols of the flag, like we are here in Italy, we are Nigerians, but we are global. You see the old flag and the flowers, the little basket where people drop their prayers. I mean, this image is also part of a book I published with 54 pictures. And in every picture, you can really see and you can really experience all the features of Pentecostalism. And I think that one class for our students will be perfect just on these pictures to understand the kind of even biblical imagination that they have of these stairs of linking heaven and heart, and how the altar represented the space where people can reach and meet the divine. But let's go ahead, and this is another altar. And this altar is so interesting because you can see at the background is very different from this one. The altar that you see here as an image of the transfiguration of Christ. Nothing striking. This is a Christian church. The striking thing is that the Pentecostals, Ghanaian Pentecostal, went to the Vatican. They took pictures of the altars in the Vatican. They saw which the altar that was fitting more with their visual piety, and they reproduce the altar in their church. So what are the Africans doing in Italy? What they are doing is to tap into the power of the visual piety of the Catholic Church, of the aesthetics of the Catholic Church, to empower their community. So they are doing something that Michel Desserteau called the tactics of the weak, of the disempowered. So, and this happened when people, instead of rebelling against the power that oppressed them, manipulate the symbols and resources of that power to get their own power. This is an image of the 20 years of activities of the New Life Pentecostal ministry in Italy. And you can see how these pastors are powerfully praying and they are engaged in what Pentecostal calls spiritual warfare. And I hope that you can get the power of this moment, the expression of their faith, and kind of get an idea on how emotional is this moment. And they were praying for the church, 20 years in Italy. And the church multiplied, opened new branches, and Bishop Amposa, the one who has the pink shirt under the African textile, he is a worker. He works in a factory. He came as an economic migrant. And now he is a bishop ordained by African-American Pentecostals who came from the U.S. to Italy to ordain him. And it's something I didn't explore, and it's really fascinating for me is the relationship between African Pentecostals and African-American Pentecostals. How are they legitimizing each other or delegitimizing each other? Because it's the double way. By the way, he was ordained by Pentecostal African-American bishops. There were 3, I think. They came from the U.S. to Italy to ordain him. And this is another interesting presence, Bishop Diana Aggiarti, the first black woman Pentecostal bishop in Italy. And her experience of being a pastor in Italy is simply amazing. And we just saw this morning the film I directed where she's saying that in Italy, when she traveled the first time wearing the dress as a pastor, the white collar, that at the airport, the police office stopped her because it was the first time for them to see a woman pastor, because in Italy, you don't have women pastors. You only have the priest. The women cannot go to the pulpit. So this is kind of, it gives you an idea of how revolutionary is her presence in Italy, how it was for her to walk in the Italian street wearing a white collar. And another woman, pastor Patience from Italy, she told me that the first time she went to Rome and she traveled with the collar, the police stopped her because they thought that she was mentally disturbed, that it was a woman dressing like a priest is not possible. So they thought that it was a mentally disturbed woman who lost her way and she didn't know how to get to Rome. And this are some of the details of Bishop Diana's office and some of the symbols of powers that she proudly show in her office. And those are some of the images of the services, prayer meeting, pastors' ordination happening in Italy. This woman was ordained as ordained is not the right term. She became a deacon in the church. And this is Pastor Andrew, who being consecrated and by the other Pentecostal pastor. And you see how moved he was wearing for the first time his collar. He was crying. And that was a very powerful moment. And those are some of the messages that Pentecostals like to remind to the believers. And this is Bishop Diana Ajarty. This is part of the material culture and the elegance, the style. Because in my research, I found that the style, the way Pentecostals dress when they go to church is not something that is by chance. Everything is really thought in a way that the way they dress, the way they look is also a message. And it's a message of dignity. And in a country like Italy, is going to church and dressing with your best clothes, with the best shoes you have, and show to your community and show to the Italian society that you have dignity and that you will find the dignity that you don't find in the street or in your factory or when you go to shop or when you meet within Italians. They show to the rest of the world that there is a place where they can find their dignity. And those places are the churches. So I will also call this way of presenting, dressing, and special aesthetics, and aesthetics of dignity. So from religious aesthetics to aesthetics of dignity. And this is something that is extremely important to think of what is global Pentecostalism today. Who are the people who are finding in Pentecostalism new expression from their feeling, from their needs, from their fear, and so on. This is an anointing from Bishop Diana to another woman. And this is the result of another anointing. And this kind of show you how powerful is the body and Pentecostalism. That the body is power, because the body is a media for the power of God or the Holy Spirit to manifest. When I was coming here this morning with Professor Johnson, we were saying Pentecostals do not really need these nice churches like the Catholics who I have this understanding that the Spirit of God pass also through art, through nature, through materiality. So since they have this vision of the presence of God also in the beauty, they make their churches so beautiful because the beauty is a media to reach the divine, right? So the buildings is a media to reach the divine. But for Pentecostals, they don't need buildings. They don't need those kind of beauty because they have their body, and their body is the major media and the most powerful means to reach the divine and have an experience of ecstasy, an experience of what Durkheim will call collective effervescence, and what Victor Turner will call communitas. It's through their body that they experience the divine. This is an anointing. I think we see this. And now I want to quickly present you two cases of the contact zone, what I call the contact zone between the African Pentecostals and the Catholic Church. And try to guess, where are these contact zones? The contact zones are in the Catholic parishes. Because for African Pentecostals, sometimes it's extremely difficult to find a place to worship. Sometimes they do not have the resources to pay very expensive rent. So where do they worship? They worship in the places provided by the Catholic churches. Of course, the Catholic Church doesn't give them the main altar. They give them the secondary buildings that usually the parish uses for meetings, for associations, and so on, and give the spaces to the Catholic Church, to the African Pentecostal churches. And those are the places I studied more carefully, and those are the places where I carried on my micro-analysis of the encounter between the Catholic Church and African Pentecostal churches. So the first church I studied is called the Tempio della Pace. And this is an old Italian church, almost empty, because the percentage of Italians attending the Catholic Mass on Sunday, I think, is around 27% of the population. So from the all 80% of Italians that call themselves Catholics, only the 20% go to church on Sunday. What do they do on Sundays? Who knows? But they don't go to church, for sure. They don't go to church. So the only population going to church is the elder population. So it is not surprising to see that the majority of Italian Catholic churches on Sundays are almost empty. So this is a parish without parishioners. This is another interesting church. It's the St. Anthony Church. It's a basilic. It's the fourth. It's one of the four Italian basilic. It means that it is under the administration of the Vatican. It's not like another church or cathedral. It's under the administration of the capital. So this is part of the Vatican state. Even politically, it's under the Vatican state. But it's a church extremely powerful because it's a church where there are the relics of St. Anthony of Padua. It means that the tongue of the saint, his real tongue, is in the church in a wonderful reliquary with his teeth. His mouth is there. And people go there to worship this dead part of the body. As you could imagine, if you are not Catholic, this is really something difficult to understand. Why Italian Catholics worship dead part of bodies? And this is a very, very important part of the Catholic practices. Having a relic or touching a relic, touching a dead part of somebody who was a saint person means to touch his power. So in this church, you see every day, and I was working close to the church when I was in Italy, so I was seeing this every day. Thousands of people going to the church to see the saint, his tomb, to pray on the tomb. And I found this extremely, I realized how weird it can be when I got to the US, when I naturally talked to people about the relics and I started to see their face changing, like, do you mean that you worship that body? So, but also in another occasion I realized how weird it can be when I brought one of the Pentecostal pastors to the church to visit the church, and his reaction when he saw the relics was like, actually he said, Holy Ghost fire, I want to leave the church. because he was even scared of what he was seeing. He told me, I don't want to see these things in my dream tonight, so I want to leave the church. But one of the most interesting things is that there is a corner in that church, which is the corner that you see here. And there's a beautiful altar, and it's called the Saint Altar. And there is an image on the back. And that is the image of the book of Revelation. When you see the 7 flames with the light coming out and the saints, I mean, it's really the whole narration of the Revelation. And there is an altar and the places to sit, chairs to sit. And I found out that many African Pentecostals go to that altar to pray. And I was shocked when I realized that they were Pentecostals. And so I spoke to a couple of them and I told them, but you come to a Catholic church to pray? I mean, this is not a Pentecostal church. And they told me, well, but in this altar, we can see the presence of the Holy Spirit. And look how beautiful is this image. So this is our Pentecostal space. So this is, I think this is a very interesting, another interesting case on how African Pentecostals, despite the challenges they have in Italy and despite this superpower of the Catholic Church and the Catholic culture of this of the Catholic subjectivities of Italian, who is really kind of making that mission impossible. You don't find Italian worship in the Pentecostal churches. They don't worship in the Catholic. They don't worship in the Pentecostal. Italians don't worship anywhere. So, but they are deeply religious, and they don't want to hear about anything else apart from the Catholic Church. The problem is that, as one of the pastors say, that it's more easy to keep Italian out of their churches than keeping the church out of the Italians. So, despite the fact that for African Pentecostals, their reverse mission or their idea, desire, aspiration of being missionaries in Italy for the Italians is an utopia for now, because it didn't happen and it's not going to happen for a while. They found their way to navigate the resources of the Catholic Church, both the economic resources and also the most powerful resource in Italy, the visual piety. So not only they are bringing the Catholic visual piety into their churches, they are also enjoying, or they are also empowering themselves. They are also having powerful moments of prayer, devotion, and adoration in the Catholic spaces with the Catholic piety. And here you see a Pentecostal, African Pentecostal praying in the altar, close to the altar. And you see there is an old lady looking at Ian and saying, what is happening here? Because, of course, she's not used to witness this kind of passionate prayer in a Catholic church. And this is one of the images from Nigeria. Was a meeting of 1 million people. And this was a moment of prayer where people were putting their hand on their head and they were praying for the power of the Holy Spirit to fall upon them. And this is an image that can show also how powerful, again, is the body. You don't see a church, you don't see a big structure. This is a camp, an open auditorium. But I think it's a powerful image that can convey how important is the body and how important it is to follow certain practice and have your own experience. So I stop here, and I'm open to discussion and even to give you more information, because I could not convey 4 years of research in 20 minutes. I really did my best. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for a wonderful presentation. This was very evocative. Quick question for you. There are Ghanaian Christian Pentecostals and there are Nigerian Pentecostals. What languages do they use in their worship? Is it their native language, or is it Italian, or is it a combination of English and Italian, or how does it work?
The Nigerians worship in English, Pidgin English, Igbo, and Yoruba. It depends. When I was there worshiping with them, they were worshiping in English. And after a while, they were putting some Igbo words just to teach me on how to pray in Igbo. But they don't worship in Italian because there are no Italians. There is no reason for them to worship in Italian. The Ghanaian churches are more open to welcome members from other ethnic groups, so they have other African worshiping with them. For example, the Church of Pentecost, they have 3 services on Sunday: the international service in English, the service in Twi, and the service in English, in international, so in English, in Twi, and the other is in English. 2 English and 1 in Twi.
I also noticed from your graphic earlier on that the number of Senegalese is very large.
Very large.
They also have their own Pentecostal expressions?
The Senegalese, the majority of them are Muslim. They are Murid. The majority of them are Murid. Okay. I never found any Christian Senegalese, despite the fact that they had one of the most beloved presidents who was Christian, Leopold Sédar Senghor. For years, he was the Christian president of a Muslim country. I never met any Christian Senegalese, but the Church of Pentecost, the Ghanaian Church of Pentecost, they have mission in Senegal as well, in a Muslim country. But the chair of the international mission in Ghana, he worked for 7 years in Italy and also in Senegal, and he told me it is more difficult to spread the gospel in Italy than in Senegal. Because you have to consider how powerful is the Catholic Church in Italy. And this micro-analysis I'm doing in Italy, I hope will open a broader reflection on the relationship between Pentecostalism and Catholicism, because it seems that they are the biggest expression of Christianity now. They are growing more or less at the same rate. Professor Johnson maybe can confirm this. So my question is how these 2 expressions of Christianities are relating to each other, how they are managing to talk, to discuss about who they are, about their beliefs and practice, how they can work together. Do they want to work together, or is it just an issue of competing to win the soul of the believers? Yes. Well, when I started this research, and I want to be very, very honest with you, this is something I'm really struggling with. I thought that seeing women on the pulpit was a big victory for the women, until I saw what women are doing from the pulpit. Sometimes they are doing extremely well. I have to say that I really felt that there was something new, positively new going on. But I also saw that sometimes the women adopt the same patriarchal strategies that oppress them. They adopt the same strategies to oppress other women as well. And this is something that I noticed. Even the way women talk about women of other ethnicities, like Bishop Diana she's a very interesting woman. She's an educated woman. Her father has a PhD from the University of Manchester. So she's a middle-class Ghanaian. The majority of her church members are Nigerians, and many of the women that were who were in her church were former prostitutes. When I asked her about her experience as a pastor, she stressed several times that, first of all, she's Ghanaian. She's not Nigerian. In a way, looking down at Nigerians. And then she stressed that she is a woman from a different status than the women she was pastoring. And the way she stressed it kind of made me understand that she's perfectly conscious of the power she had, and she knows how to exercise her power in the church. Also, the fact that she's a woman pastor, it doesn't mean that she is fighting for the liberation of women. Because in the church, she stated several times that the head is always the man. And I was very disappointed. I'm sorry to say this, I was disappointed because and maybe my disappointment is something that it should not be part of my research, because I don't have to deal with what are my personal desire for this women pastor, but I was imagining another kind of approach. To say, okay, we made it and we want to liberate other women. She was not supporting the oppression of other women, but she was clearly stating that the head is the man, that she has the charisma, that she is the bishop of the church, but the head is the husband. Well,
Submission of women. And in most Pentecostal churches, women must wear dresses, they can't wear pants. I don't know whether that's true in these churches.
well, not in her church, because she's a very, very elegant and fancy woman. You see her nail. I will never get such a long nail in my life. I don't know how she does this kind of things, but she really is a beautiful woman, and there are some pictures of her. Very elegant, very fashionable, and she really, you can see her nail here. And she's really, she loves beauty. She was a tailor. She was working in fashion. So she's not the kind of woman who's saying, no, you have to cover your head. You don't have to look good. You have to look sad and dull to be holy. No. She's not this kind of woman. So in a way, she's more liberated than other women. But the idea is that still submission is the key. But there are other women who clearly state and read the Bible in a different way, because it's true that the Bible says that the woman should submit to the man. But the verses before that one talk about love and respect, and it's something that it comes before submission. So this is the old debate of how women and Pentecostal interpret Paul, and what Paul says, that women should not preach, that women should shut up. But it also says how controversial is the gender issue within the Pentecostal movement. It's something that is not resolved. It's not resolved. It's something that has still to be, Pentecostals are still struggling with it. There are 3 very important books. One is about Ghana, one is about Korea, and the other one is another book on women and Pentecostalism. And these 3 books show how Pentecostalism is dealing in different way with gender in different countries. Like in Ghana, there is a book wrote by Professor Short-Hill, and she said that still the women pastors in Ghana are kind of celebrating and exalting the motherhood of women. So the strategy to empower women is to empower their role as a mother. So as the mother of the churches, and the power they have is more the power of being the wife of the big pastor, the power of being the mother of the church. But still, she says how complicated it is, even there, for women to find a new identity as a Pentecostal woman. And this is something that I didn't read in any Pentecostal writing, because the majority of Pentecostal theologians are men. There are no women Pentecostals are not writing. There is a Pentecostal, I don't know even if she's Pentecostal, she's Ghanaian, Mercy Odudoye. She wrote about gender, and she is more progressive than Bishop Diana, and more progressive than other women pastors I interviewed. I don't want to question the idea of submission, because this is something. There is even a book entitled The Power of Submission, and there is the old literature of how women find their way to their rights, how women find in different cultures the way to their rights. So maybe my understanding of liberation, of feminism, of how a free woman should look like is very influenced by my Western background of hardcore feminist. So the book of Saba Mahmoud, Politics of Piety, shows a total different way of how Muslim women exercise their rights. And it's something that Western scholars don't really get. So it's an open debate, and I hope that more women will write about it, more women theologians will write about it. We need it, because we have several sociological research on it, but still we have to develop the debate within the Pentecostal movement.
I have a question. If I know very little about Pentecostalism, but I just want to ask this question anyway. It sounds, from your presentation, it sounds like the African Pentecostalist or the churches really try to deal with the social issues, this community experience through the more spiritual way or supernatural way, prayer, and kind of really resorting to the kind of piety. I am just curious about if the church, or as a whole, have any interaction more like in a practical way of the systems in the area? Like, is there more of a separation between this diaspora group, the church, and the, I guess, political platform, or even just the community sort of activism, kind of those efforts?
It's very individual. It's very individual. There are pastors who have been involved in very serious protest, and they were part of unions, of associations, from political associations, NGOs, but it's not something that is part of the Pentecostal ethos. It's more part of their individual experience, of their personality, of their understanding of social engagement. I didn't find any organized way of understanding political action, and I want to tell you more. One Pentecostal pastor decided to contest for an election to be a local representative of the African communities. The member of his church didn't vote for him. They voted for the man belonging to the same ethnic group, not for the pastor. They voted for the man from Benin City, and he was not from Benin. He was from another city, another state. So they prefer to vote for the pastor from their own state other than from their own pastor. And it says a lot also about the fluidity of the diverse identities that the people in the diaspora inhabit according to the different circumstances they deal with. Yeah, within the diaspora, the ethnic identity is extremely strong. I wanna show you. Sorry, you will see I have a website. I am building it. To be honest, I am revising the content, and I want to keep it updated. And I will include my film, so you will be able to see the film, download it, use it for your class, for your study, for your papers, for whatever you want, but not against me. My website is entitled Pentecostal Aesthetics, and I am kind of revising the text also to explain more. This is the very, very first thing I did 1.5 years ago, so I'm working more on the text. So you will see the project, you will read a little bit about it, the people who are involved in the project, something about the documentary, something about the visual archive, and some of the pictures that are part of the visual archive, the catalog. I mean, to check what's going on with my research, check my website, give me 1 week or 10 days to update it.